Okay, welcome to take two of our Friday Live FM Better Forms meetup group. This is kind of a re-recording of our original recording of earlier on today. Somebody forgot to push the play button, or the record button rather, for our original recording. So we're just going to re-record the very, very first bit. We have a great guest today, or had a great guest today, Jesse Roberts from N2O Solutions. And Jesse is going to talk about software as a service and using FileMaker, and of course Better Forms as well. Just before we start into that recording from earlier today, we're going to look at just a few updates we have. In Better Forms, we have a new panel update element, or element, I should say. And the panel element's pretty neat because it's a collapsible, kind of like an accordion panel that you can use for user interface design. It's really, really great for dashboards. You can save state and things like that. There's some examples there for if you want to search the examples. We've added a $BF_app global variable to all hooks. And this is a super, super easy upgrade. And what it does is it allows you to inject data site-wide into the app model. The app model is kind of like the data model for a page. This is for the Better Forms developers. But it's more like a session. It stays persistent from page to page. So it makes it really, really easy. And that works in conjunction with the on-app load hook, which is a script that is called whenever the page gets refreshed. So if somebody's logged in and they refresh the page, they don't have to log in again, but you want to still pull up their account information and maybe display that in the top corner as to who's logged in, that type of thing. And another really, really big feature, and this is just in beta now, but it's available in the application, is a multi-company and multi-user support. This allows developers to work for different companies and for a given organization to add various developers and control their abilities within the application. A quick thanks or shout out to Mark Anderson of Floristware. Floristware is one of the florist industry's top apps, and it happens to run on FileMaker. He was courteous enough to let us take advantage of his GoToMeeting today. A couple upcoming events for Better Forms, and a few in the past as well. We were just recently at Pause on Air in Tulum, and that was a great turnout. We had a quick presentation there, but we did talk about a number of things to a number of our Better Forms users there. Chicago FileMaker developer meetup. Thanks to Chris Conger for that, to inviting us down to that event. We had a great time working there and talking. We talked basically web publishing and software as a service and all kinds of stuff for about a couple hours or so, and that was at the Soliant offices there, which is a beautiful facility as well. Next month, we're going to be in Turin, Italy, on site doing some training, and we're meeting some other Better Forms developers. And then we're moving over to Berlin, Germany, where we're speaking and presenting at .fmp. So if you happen to be in Europe any of those times, reach out to us. You can get a hold of us either through my Twitter or through Slack. And join, meet us, and we can go over some things there and talk and drink beer and things like that. Atlanta FileMaker Developer Meetup, that's coming up. The date isn't decided, but I believe that's in July. We were invited to go speak there, so we will be in Atlanta. And of course, at the big event, the FileMaker Developers Conference, and that's going to be in Orlando in August. We'll be appearing at other meetups as scheduled as well. So if you have the opportunity to come out and see us, please, by all means, do, because it's always fun to meet some of our users, our developers, and of course other FileMaker users. So we're going to jump right to our pre-recorded session. We tried to clean up the audio a little bit because it was a little bit weak, and I hope you enjoy it. Jesse Roberts is from N2O Solutions, and he's going to be talking about software as a service. We haven't missed much of the recording, probably about the first 15 or 20 seconds or so. So I hope you enjoy it, and once again, thank you, Jesse, for a great presentation today.
Started as kind of a pet project for my wife's business, which you see on the screen here. It's called Brand Builders, and we've developed a custom app for her business to help her manage the day-to-day life of a promotional marketing agency. And it was one of those things where I just wanted to get her life back. She was spending, she was triple keying everything, whether, it was going into a Excel spreadsheet and into Microsoft OneNote and then into an email, and basically just wasting all kinds of time on, the management of the business. So this originally started back in 2010 for us as just a simple project, but now it's really morphed into a business. And we have turned this software that you see on your screen, Stiletto. This now runs a number of agencies in the US, and is used by a few thousand contractors every day all over the country, to manage promotional activity in the wine and spirits industry. So it's been kind of an interesting ride, to say the least, going from being a true citizen developer to now being, this being my full-time gig and what I do and what I really enjoy doing.
So you pretty much develop full-time then, and how much time do you spend sort of working on FileMaker versus managing business?
So I think at this point now, the platform is relatively mature. The only thing that we're really doing now is we're working on a scale project, which we'll talk about here in a second. But in terms of my actual development time, it's really dwindled to probably 20 to 30% of my time. The rest of it is about planning and scale for the future, and working on kind of some bigger projects related to the wine and spirits industry. So it's much more about business development tied into our existing platform.
So Jesse, you said your app is used by several thousand people, but those aren't, who are your actual customers? Those are the wine and spirit manufacturers, or their marketing companies, or?
So the wine and spirits industry is really interesting. It's called a 3-tier system. So you have, at the top end, you have suppliers, and those are going to be your Jack Daniels, your Gallo wines, Anheuser-Busch, the big names out there. Those are suppliers. And suppliers are required by law to sell their products to distributors. And you probably see distributors' trucks in your towns driving around, the big beer truck or the Constellation wine truck. And so that's the second tier, that's the distributor. And then the final tier, the third tier, is the retailer. And that can be, the liquor store on the corner. It could be a restaurant or a bar. It could even be a golf course, right? So that's kind of the third tier. So what we've done is we've basically built our platform to plug into each of those 3 tiers. There's a 4th tier, and that's kind of where we're managing a lot of our volume, and that's the agency that manages the promotions between these 3 tiers. And that's where Stiletto lives, that you see here on the screen now. And we have another app that's called Magnum, which is here. And Magnum, it's typically used on an iPad. And Magnum is used by distributor reps out in the field to book events directly for their activities. And so Magnum is plugged into the top 2 tiers, being the supplier and the distributor. And then Stiletto works on the bottom tier in the actual accounts. And it's used by the contractors who work for the agencies all across the US.
Right. Do you monetize each one of the 3 products, or do you throw Magnum in as part of the suite?
Well, that's kind of the fun part, because we're able to monetize each of the tiers. So suppliers pay for Magnum because they want to have access to great data. Distributors pay for Magnum because they want their reps to be able to have a much easier job out in the field, booking and managing their events. And then we obviously monetize Stiletto to make sure that the agencies are doing what they need to manage their work in the field. And then we also have a mobile application for Stiletto so that the actual contractors, and here's a version of that. This is an old version, by the way, and that's monetized as well. So the actual contractors who are in the field pay for access to this version of the app, which feeds data directly into Stiletto, which is the desktop version here. So we've got kind of all of the layers monetized just to make sure that we have a good cash flow position, but also to keep the funding for research and development rolling.
Right, right. So, and then did you evolve? Did they all kind of come about at the same time, or did you start with one app and then branched off that you saw an extra market?
It's interesting. The app originally started as just Stiletto, and it was just for the management of of the agency itself. With the release of FileMaker Go, we had kind of the idea, this kind of the aha moment of why don't we have our contractors in the field filling out all of the data that we were collecting on paper forms. So that's when the very first app was created, and that's what you see here. And this contractor will go into her app, and she'll click on a particular event, and that takes her to the details of the event, and she can sign her contract and take pictures of the event that you'll see here. She can check in and photos and all that sort of thing, and report back what she sold. And that used to take our management team a ton of hours to manage and deal with. And what we figured out is just by launching this mobile app and putting the work back onto the contractors in the field, we saved something like 3,000 man hours just in the first year alone in keying. So, the monetization was great on one end, but the business practice on the other end of freeing our people up so that they can work on the business, not in the business, was a big deal for us. So once we had that piece going, then we had the idea of making it even easier so that instead of having to key in events from reps that they sent to us by email, why not just give them a FileMaker solution that they could use to key events in, and using the magic of FileMaker to transfer the data back and forth. And that's how Magnum was created. So Magnum is the last of the pieces, but it's actually going to end up being the biggest of all, because now Magnum is truly a national solution with all of the major liquor suppliers using it and pushing events all across the country into various installations of Stiletto all over the US. So it's really it started as a small idea and has scaled pretty quickly, and is a really kind of put us in a great position from a market standpoint. We really wanted our platforms, Magnum and Stiletto, to kind of be the quote unquote Xerox of the industry, to be the tools that everyone talks about, and we're well on the way with that in the one.
Yeah, so if you that's pretty good. So you're basically establishing yourself as the expert where.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. The smaller app that you have in the background there, the one with the lady on the front, or I think that was it. Yeah. So that was a FileMaker Go app, or?
Yeah. So this is FileMaker. It's FileMaker Go. But what we had to do is actually turn this into WebDirect, because so many of our contractors, and we did some research on this, and in the Baltimore, Washington market, most of our users, it was 2-to-1 iOS to Android, but we still had to figure out a way to solve the Android problem. So we went with WebDirect to kind of make this work, and we built like a web an app wrapper to put connection to the WebDirect application in, and it works. I mean, it's okay. And we released that through the Google Play Store and through the App Store. And that's nice and all, but Google and Apple take 30% of each sale. That's no fun.
Right. So you use something. Do you know what the technology is, like Cordova or something, like one of those app type, or?
Yeah, we used originally we used a company called Swiftic to help build it. It's one of those kind of those self-compiler things, and you can do it all web-based and basically plug in your URLs. So it was simple, easy to put together. But at the end of the day, what we found out is that when you do those kind of simple app things, you have a much harder time in navigating the various app stores and the rules about them. So we've had our apps pulled from the Google store essentially for things that we couldn't control in terms of access to a camera or access to various components inside of Android.
Oh, wow. So what happens? Sorry to interrupt you. What happens when they pull it from the store? Like, is that kind of a business killer, or?
Yeah, well, it definitely hurts, because then what you have to do is you'd have to say, well, if you hire somebody, we're basically going to give them the back end link to the WebDirect form, and we can't monetize that individual contractor. So, that does end up being a business problem. About, I don't know, 4 months ago, we had a real issue with Google, and I realized that we've got to do something about this. Because at the end of the day, the idea of our business being kind of held hostage by the Play Store and even iTunes, for that matter, is just not, it's not good enough for us. Like, we can't do that. And that was really kind of the genesis for the conversation to kind of get moving and thinking about better forms, because I knew we had to have a better way. And that's kind of where the conversation got us to where we are now with the work that we've done with Better Forms and getting this going.
Right. So I think you onboarded around February, was it?
I think I onboarded like last week of February, and we did our first training call like the 25th or something like that. To kind of really jump in and get started with what the app was going to do, and how we wanted it to work and help manage kind of our existing business case.
Right. And what did you end up building?
So what we ended up building basically took this experience that you're seeing right here for an individual contractor, and so you've got this view right now that's in WebDirect that's okay, it's not great, but what we ended up doing is turning this into a beautiful Better Form application for a contractor. Much cleaner, much easier. It's obviously responsive and does what it's supposed to, but it works across all of the applications now, which is great. So it works on Android brilliantly. It works on iOS. It works on Windows machines. It works on the browser, iPad, iPhone, doesn't matter. So we're able to free ourselves up from that, which is great. And it allows contractors to get in and do, the same work that they were doing before, but now, it's a little easier to manage on the screen itself. The data is all here, and it's clean, and it's an experience that people kind of know and expect when they work on a mobile device. So we're able to do all the same work in terms of tracking confirmation calls and GPS coordinates for when people check in, and capturing photos and receipts from the events themselves, and comments and signatures. So we're able to do all of this again. But do it in a really clean fashion, and do it in a way that just fits with the modern web experience that people expect.
Oh, that's great. I've seen your app from time to time, but it's kind of neat, kind of seeing everything in action. Don't always get a chance to see that.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say it's been a really interesting process. I wish I would have been taking screenshots the whole way, just because this is a much different view than it first was. But the best part about what we're doing with Better Forms now is, and why I love FileMaker in general, is if you can imagine it, you can do it, right? I mean, as a citizen developer, I didn't have a background in computer science, and I didn't really have any training in it at all. I was someone that just dove in and wanted to figure this whole thing out. And because of that great connection with FileMaker, Better Forms has allowed me to kind of let my imagination come to the screen. That part's been great.
So Jesse, do you still have any App Store apps, or
so
with the
apps are currently still out there. We're going to be transitioning that over the next month. So instead of having those on the App Store, we're going to have those move to a private store on the N2O Solutions website. That does two things. One, it allows us to keep kind of complete control of that process. But two, it allows us to recapture 30% of a sale that we couldn't normally get. Right. So we're going to have a nice little bump on that for all the new contractors that come on board over the summer.
So how long did it take you to sort of come up with this version of your app now in Better Forms?
Yeah, so I think once I've got in, so it's been about a month. It took me about a month to kind of get this basic component driven thing built and get all the scripts working in the back end, because there's some complicated things that we needed to find in terms of capturing a number of events that a contractor has worked and will work in the future. So once we kind of got the general business layout and business process together, it was about a month and a half or so. I think we've been really ready to go to market for the past 2 weeks, and we've been doing some training in the field, and we've been having some users work with the product and give us some great feedback. I mean, even literally just yesterday, I got feedback that it would be great, for example, to be able to see who else is working at an event. So in this case, I see there's 2 team members, and if I want to get in and call them or text them, I can do that directly from the app now. Those little additions, if it was in HTML or PHP, which I have some knowledge in, but I can't just whip that up together. In Better Forms, I was able to do that with my existing FileMaker knowledge. That was a 30-minute project, and now we've got a great component to add to the feature set, and it makes the user experience that much better.
Excellent, excellent. How are you distributing the app? Like, I mean, obviously it's through a website, but how do the end users get the link?
Yeah, so basically they're going to our website, n2osolutions.com. We have a store page there, which takes them to basically a form that we've built. And there are a number of agencies that work with us. So I've built Better Forms now for 3 of our other clients that are using Stiletto. So for example, so Key Components is another one, right? So you can log in for Key Components. So they have their own business practices as well, but their app is similar. It does a lot of the same things, and it connects to their own version of Stiletto. So they have a link in the store to purchase, a link and a welcome video and slideshow with instructions on how to use the application.
So you actually have the monetization outside of Better Forms. So you have it on your parent site that they're getting the link from. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So your method for multi-tenant application, you basically more or less clone your site in Better Forms, and then you just point it to your existing FileMaker database on the back end.
That's right, because we have on our main Stiletto server, we've got I believe it's 8 different clients on the main server, and so we can just point the file to that server. There's an existing Better Forms helper file there, so that can handle the load and manage all of the requests that come in for event management.
Somebody had asked, how do you log in and sign up users? Like, how are new users to your application onboarded?
Right. So essentially, once somebody is hired, and we have kind of a process for that when they apply to work for Brand Builders. So just for instance, they come into to contractors here. We have a prospects page that we can view. When people come in and they register. Like here's someone who came in. So here's Lisa. We can see that she came in on the 19th, and then we can go and jump into her record, see when her inquiry was. Then she goes through a hiring process, and right now she's still in inquiry. Once she goes to the hiring stage, then she fills out some paperwork, and she'll get a link then, which will take her to the purchase page on the store. So she'll then purchase the application, which will give her a link to the back end to get to the Better Forms login page, which would be here, so that she can go in and do the sign up and registration at that point.
Excellent. How do you and as far as FileMaker Server goes, do you guys do your own hosting, or use a third-party hosting company, or how does that work?
Yeah. So right now we have we are using third-party hosting, but it is AWS based. We're going to be making some changes with that in the short term because of this scale project that we're working on right now, which we're essentially going to be moving. We're moving our data connection to basically disconnect Magnum from all of the versions of Stiletto and do everything now through data API as opposed to table occurrences. And that's going to speed up a lot of the processes. But what that's also going to mean is we have to make sure that the all of the AWS things are done
Right.
done
So,
right.
so just to make sure I understand. So from FileMaker to FileMaker, instead of right now you're using an external data source and you have table occurrences in say file A to talk to file B, which is Magnum,
Yep,
and you're going to instead use the data API for that.
that's correct.
Right. That's actually a pretty good idea because that allows you to go from server to server now. You're not bound to the same server.
Well, and the one thing that we found is we have the wine and spirits industry is extremely competitive, and there's a lot of um, concern on the client side about making sure that they have, that their data is not only secure, but it's it's walled off from competition being able to see it.
Right. So that way
So,
you can say that, okay, your data is actually sitting on a physically server different machine if they so
that's it.
choose.
Yep, absolutely. And with AWS giving us the ability to do that and do it nice and cleanly, that just makes it that much better for us from a customer service standpoint to keep those companies happy.
Right. So as far as building goes, what challenges did you have? Let's start maybe from the technical aspect. Um,
Sure.
what was easy, what was hard?
Yeah. So I think that if there was a quote unquote hard thing, it was really kind of getting my head around the JavaScript connections to certain actions in better forms. Over the past year, I've been kind of preparing myself for API conversations and how to make sure that I understood how API and JSON work. I did a couple of projects on the side. Like I built a database that was able to pull in the entire 2017 NFL schedule, including all the players, games, stadiums, and coaching staffs using the NFL's API source. And so I did that project just so I could get a better understanding of how JSON worked, how to do, how to really move around the set elements and get elements functions inside of FileMaker. That made it so much easier for me to be able to kind of understand the better forms language to just jump in and be able to make things move around there. So for me, the real technical challenge just was the JavaScript piece. Now that more and more stuff in FileMaker is going to JSON, I think it makes the lift a lot easier.
Yeah, the skills, I think any skill set that you learn, somebody said to me years ago, dedicate a third of your time to developing developing yourself, to doing research. And I pretty much, it seems like I do about 50% of the time because it's just fun. But every single skill set that you learn, as long as it's reasonably close, is very, very transferable. And just to preface what you said, the JavaScript that is used in better forms is generally truthiness type equations and a little bit of calculation, some sorting, those types of things. They're all stuff that are relatively, it's not a lot of multi-line code. Generally speaking, it's usually stuff that is controlling the front end. Although we try to keep as much of a separation of concerns between front end and back end, so the back end has all the business logic. You still have to have some simple logic, things like conditional hiding and maybe calculating a first name plus a last name, that type of stuff on the front end. So we do have to learn a little bit of that. I think for most of the developers, that's come along. Like they start to get that, and we can all kind of cut and paste, and I think that's the first way of learning stuff, by just sort of cutting and pasting and then changing.
Yeah, and it's funny.
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, just to add on to that, it's funny you say that because I feel like the community, the Better Forms community, I think does a really good job of not only sharing code but sharing ideas. So it's made the I'll call it the jump into JavaScript a little less scary for me, at least personally. Just knowing that, okay, there's other ways to approach this conversation, and you guys, I think, do a really good job of kind of keeping.
Yeah, I think our community has actually been really, really excellent. We have about maybe about 80 people or so on our Slack group, and anybody's welcome to join that. By the way, we have a lot of lurkers, I guess you could say, which are just following along from a technical interest. But there's maybe about a dozen people who are pretty good at answering questions, and they can chime in and stuff, and that really helps everybody else out, because when they realize that it's okay to ask a question, people are a little bit more forthcoming with that. Angel is asking a question. He says, the app looks great, Jesse. What are some of the issues you've encountered when building the Better Forms app, and how did you eventually solve these issues? So some of those things you've addressed. But.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that the big issues that I had kind of to start with, and I think Charles has really kind of helped me out with this, is thinking about the data model and making sure that what I'm doing is consistent across all of the components, right? So I mean, you've got this this piece when you log in where you've kind of got today, the future, and the past. It's actually a really easy thing to do to separate and get this thing together, but making the data do what I wanted to, that was the biggest challenge to start. And in terms of issues, I'll say this. I think the biggest issue I had was really my own impatience. I'm somebody that when I jump into a project like this, I throw a lot of time into it, and I throw a lot of energy. And you know, I was joking with my wife that I feel like there's times where I wake up in the middle of the night and all I'm seeing are curly braces and semicolons because I'm thinking about JSON all the time. But what really kind of got me going in the right direction is just making sure that, you know, my data was clean on the back end coming in from Stiletto. And you know, Charles is really great about kind of helping me think through this from a web development side and not just a FileMaker side, which was great.
Right. Dan's just asking, what is the user load, like the number of connections you coming into your site? And Dan, I think, did you mean like the amount of Better Forms users, or? Yeah. So like typically how many users do you have it rolled out to now?
So right now, in our testing right now, we've probably got between 10 and 20 users out there in the market who are testing this kind of all over the, you know, the Baltimore, Washington market here. And what's great about this is that the connections are super brief. So somebody logs on for 2 seconds, checks their phone number, logs off, right? So in terms of load, we never really see a jump of like 50 users hitting the server at a time. The most I've ever seen on any one particular file on login is 12 users. And that includes people using the desktop version of the app. So from a load standpoint, I haven't seen any issues on the server screen. What's great though is that because WebDirect chews up so many resources on the AWS box that we're going to see a real reduction in bandwidth and throughput on that machine. So I'm really excited about how that's all going to play out.
Yeah, the connections are going to be stateless, so they're really just in and out for that brief period of time. Like while you've had these apps up, there has been zero chatter to your FileMaker server.
Yep.
Unless you're navigating around, and even then, it's only when you're navigating to a fresh page and fetching fresh data.
Mm-hmm. Which is great. I mean, you're talking, you know, looking at our load times, you're talking 900 milliseconds is kind of your typical load time right now. So a second each is I'll take that. I'll take that all day long.
Yeah, and you'll actually, if you can actually look at the FileMaker load, quite often it can be optimized quite a bit. For example, one of our developers, not Better Forms developers, but somebody who's using Better Forms, I should say, not an in-house. Chris, he does a lot of caching with that, you know, caching data so you don't have to do so much querying of data that's relatively static. So there's a ton of room of optimization. Later on in this quarter, we're going to have a lot of optimization too. There's going to be a little bit coming out in the next few weeks with reduced data transfer between the client and the server, but there's going to be some more optimization coming out later on. with
Mhm.
caching of pages right in the client, and you're going to see almost a night and day difference. About a preliminary tests show about 3 or 4-fold improvement in response time. So that's
Awesome.
really looking forward to that. Actually, Chris had a question. He says, Jesse, in your store on the N2O site, is the store in your N2O site going to be for both Android and iOS, or just Android?
So I made the decision that we're just going to make it straight up just one link. When I'm not gonna discern between Android and iOS for this one reason, and that is um, I want the experience to just be as clean as possible, right? So yeah, I mean, we could have our iOS people using FileMaker Go, and that would be nice. But I want to get to a point where it's easier for me, from a development standpoint, to kind of maintain one code base. And that means if I can just keep the Better Forms app for the contractors rolling and going really well, that's going to be better for me from a business standpoint. So that's kind of the direction I'm going to go. I'm thinking about the idea of a Better Forms application for our management team when they're out in the field. There is an iOS version for the managers, and they're all on iPhones because they're required to be. So, I mean, I can manage that without an issue, but I think having the ability for them to jump on Better Forms quickly, make an adjustment to either a brand or a contractor in an event, I think would be great. And that's kind of a down the road thing. I'm in development right now on the Magnum Better Forms piece, and so this is kind of where what this looks like to start with. It's again, it's a similar concept in terms of what we're doing in booking events, but we want to make it easy for the reps to get in and deal with what they're doing, and you can see kind of from the side-by-side standpoint, it's a similar kind of concept and look and feel to get in, create an event, and manage it, and that's kind of where we want to go, big picture with that. So
Actually, that brings up an
Yeah.
interesting point, is when you're developing for when you're developing Better Forms for an application, you generally can't always go a verbatim to what your FileMaker app does, because the FileMaker apps are effectively, our design paradigm is based on the underlying table occurrence. So everything that sits on that table is usually some kind of relationship. You know, if we have to make a dashboard in FileMaker, that means you're sitting on some type of a UI table, and that could be connected to 5 or 10 different other tables underneath with a bunch of related data and a whole big string under. But in Better Forms, we don't really have to be bound like that. So what kinds of things did you sort of, what epiphanies, I guess you could say, did you have in terms of UI and decoupling yourself from the FileMaker paradigm?
Well, so it really was that the idea of I could have 24 different data models poured into one data session, right, that we load on the screen, and just let Better Forms do all the heavy lifting.
Right.
I used to turn myself in circles and knots when I first started developing in FileMaker, trying to get the data that I wanted to show up on the screen. Because, like, to your point, it was all context driven. Well, now I can design based on user experience and not really care about what the specific table context is. I can just design what I know what my user needs, and I can do the heavy lifting in the background in terms of getting the data together, and let Better Forms do all the work of presenting it. So that to me was kind of the aha moment, like, oh man, this is going to be so much better for our people to use.
How have you, or how are you gaining feedback from your users?
So a couple of ways. Obviously, so we have a Slack channel internally that we use, which is great and very helpful. We're also using this platform called FullStory, and I'll pop this open real quick, so that you can kind of see what's happening in your app in real time. So right now, somebody, let's see, here's somebody in Atlanta is logged in, who's obviously somewhere else, and they're logging into the site. And maybe this is maybe this is one of our friends here who's on the call. There we go. Here's somebody who is using it in Washington, and they're using it on their desktop. So now I can actually see what people are doing and see the feedback in real time to see what links work. Are people having issues with certain links, with certain logins, whatever. So I can see what's actually happening in the field and not asking people, what page did something crash on? I can actually go back and look at the actual usage to see when something may have gone wrong for a user. So this is fantastic.
Yeah, so that tracks the geographic stuff. You have the recording of the interactions.
Yeah.
And it's only mildly creepy. But I presented Full Story just briefly at one of the local FileMaker developers, and I got a lot of pushback. And it's kind of ignorant pushback, to be honest with you. Not, I mean that they were rude, but that they just didn't know any better, and they thought, well, we can't use this on our application. And I thought, do you have any idea how much data tracking and analytics like Facebook and everybody does? I mean, this is stuff that us little guys we can actually do some really, really good UI feedback,
Well, and
UX feedback.
the best part about this, I mean, this is basically the free version of Full Story. I don't need all the extra crazy analytics. I just need to see how people are using it.
Yeah.
Right? I just need to see, I need to see click points. I need to see that they're scrolling when they're supposed to. I need to see that they're clicking save when they're supposed to, so that I can manage the expectations, and we can do training on the back end and make sure that people are using the app appropriately. We put together a slide deck. So we could train everybody on what to do, right? So we put this slide deck, and this actually comes out when you purchase the app. You get this slide deck that tells you exactly what to do, step by step, throughout the entire app. That information that we just got from Full Story is going to help us to clean this up and make this even more robust, but also to say, okay, this is where people were screwing up the check-in screen. Here's what we need to make sure that we line that up, right? So this is going to help us help our contractors make things easier for them. Our goal and the goal of any technology is to make things easier for your user, and the easier we can make it for them to give us the data, the easier it is for us to report that data back to our clients.
Did you have any problems installing it? Was it easy, hard?
It was a snippet of code that I'll really show you. What's great about it is it's a snippet of code that drops right into Embedded Forms, right into your DOM, and it's right here. And that's what does it all. Just a little snippet you copy and paste in, and that runs all of your information in the background. What's great with Full Story is that you can also you can hide your IP address, so that you can when you're doing testing, you're not going to show up as a bunch of sessions.
Well, that's interesting.
So,
I've never enabled that. I'll have to do that because I'm the biggest user. So
right.
yeah, that's a great tip actually. So there's a number of applications that you can I guess you could call them third-party helper apps that you can use with Better Forms or anything like that. I mean, we internally use Better Forms. We use it for our editor, for the IDE that you were just on, and then we also use it for the marketing website as well. And it's incredibly informative. I mean, it makes Google Analytics look totally. Google Analytics are just that. They're just totals of numbers. Where if you really want to know what interests people, you add this onto your marketing site, and you'll see what people are reading. Because if they're on a desktop computer, they usually read with their mouse pointer, and they're almost guaranteed to have that mouse pointer within an inch or two of whatever it is they're reading, and it's incredibly insightful. So
it's interesting. I used to use a tool called crazyegg.com, and that allows you to see kind of the heat maps and where people are clicking. And at one point in my life, I was in software sales for a website company, and we had a picture of an iPhone up on the screen, and we noticed using Crazy Egg that, and I'll show it to you here. Like, you think about if you had this up on a screen somewhere, we saw this huge red blot of activity around the phone button, because people were clicking it to see if this actually did something. So it gave us a great piece of
You mean on
user
the slide,
interface.
like on the slide picture,
Yeah, exactly.
not on the actual phone?
So
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, yeah.
we were able to do that. And so what we did is we turned that little button into a link to something else on the website that we wanted people to do as a call to action. So this data is really useful and really helpful, big picture, for your interaction, your UI and UX.
Awesome. Is there any other are there any tips that you can give sort of new developers? So with our Better Forms with our existing clientele, we have about a little over 50 something organizations, separate organizations that are on our VIP trial. And coming up this summer, we'll open the doors for anybody to join up. And of those people, approximately 25% of them have verticals very similar to what you do. And we'll try to have a
Mhm.
few more on as well. We had Dave Pong, who's I think on the call today. I saw his name earlier. He's built some different things, and we're going to have in the upcoming call we're going to have Andrew from Australia. He's got a really neat use case, um, which kind of blew me away what he did. Really some really neat things that people are making. But we also have dev consultancies, like some of the various size consultancy agencies, and everybody in between as well. So they're all kind of depending on how much they've embraced things. Um, they've they've had I would say different levels of success. We have one consulting house that's probably built maybe a half a dozen different apps for different clients, and they're sort of I don't know how they're working their monetization with that, um, but they're having a tremendous amount of success, and other ones who are just using it for very small things. So is there any advice that you could give other vertical people in your space? Um, any
Yeah,
pointers?
I think for me, if I was going to give advice to anybody, I would literally say that FileMaker talks about being a workplace innovation platform, and that's kind of where they're going, and that's absolutely true, right? I mean, we've tracked how much FileMaker has helped to change our business, but I think if your business does anything with external facing entities, you have to think about how to give them access to data in a way that they are used to consuming it. And don't be afraid to dream big. Don't be afraid to use a cocktail napkin and sketch out some things and see if you can make it happen. We've done most of our development on cocktail napkins over the past 10 years, and we've got a pretty cool solution going now. But now that we've got this going on Better Forms, I've got a whole notebook full of ideas for things I'd like to be able to do next. I mean, there's a whole series of demos and examples that use charts, and I have a dashboard, if you remember seeing kind of on our back end over here. So if I go over to Stiletto and my main screen here, we've got a dashboard here. This would be a great thing to show somebody when they log in. So dreaming big, I think is the way to go with this if you're gonna dive in. And don't be afraid to try, and don't be afraid to see if you can make something really cool happen. We did a report for our clients, and it was one of those things that turned out coming from a sketchbook. And this is a PDF report that we send to our clients that tells them exactly what happened on one page. So this breaks down, a month's worth of data that's collected through the app onto one page with just some simple graphics that goes out as a PDF. To be able to create this now in Better Forms will be fantastic, and this is where things are going to go. This was a game changer for us. This one thing on the screen earned my wife's business, I can't tell you how many clients,
Right.
just because this reporting that doesn't exist right now in the liquor industry.
Right. So it's basically a KPI dashboard, right?
Yeah, that's it, right?
So yeah,
So
and that's pretty easy to build too, because really you're gathering all the data in FileMaker and then you're just putting it underneath in a display.
just throw it in
Right. We added a
So-
few. There's a few new examples actually. I didn't mention those, but because they're not really part of the Better Forms framework, but they're just kind of technique files. One of them is how to use Google Charts, and that's super, super easy. And the other one is on how to use like a spark line, those small little squigglies that kind of give you an idea of how things are doing over time. So that's something you may want to
That's
look at
exactly.
too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, that's excellent, Jesse. Thank you. I'm going to see if does anybody have any other questions or want to jump in there? By all means, just chime in. Give it a few seconds here because there's people putting down their sandwich and
Put down the coffee to type. Yeah.
it looks scrounging for the mute button and things like that. So, right, it's I've always found it fascinating to see other people's work, and we don't usually get a chance. We were actually I was having a seat with Chris Conger and Paul Costanzo, who's on this call today, and at Pause, and we were saying that we don't often see other dev houses work. We see more. A lot of times, people are presenting when they have vertical applications like yourself, but we don't generally see other client work, which is kind of a
Mhm.
shame. I'm not sure why there is, maybe to various reasons. So it's always nice to see what somebody's actually doing in the real world that's profitable for them. They're making a living from it, and all the peripheral services and apps and things like that that we all use. So there's some really good tips there. So thank you.
It's great. I'm glad to be able to be part of the conversation and keep things moving and to share the experience because it's been a lot of fun and I've got some more big plans of things I want to do next. So looking forward to the next couple of months.
Great. Yeah. Thanks again, Jesse. And if you have any questions, you can always reach Jesse on Slack as well. There is, if you're here today, you would have gotten an email. On the bottom of that email, there was a Slack invite. You're welcome to come join, shoot any questions. Doesn't have to be related to Betterform specifically. I'm just going to jump back over to screens here and, come join us. Just a couple things just in closing before we finish up today. We want to kind of keep these kind of fun and interesting, and I kind of like the idea of having them on Friday, but if you find that there's a better time, we're pretty open to that. Of course, we'd have to change the cool name from Friday live to Wednesday afternoon live or whenever it is. Our VIP developer preview is on our very last week this week. And at Pause, at .fmp in Berlin is when we're going to end enrollments for our tier 3, which is at this price point, and we'll be moving towards our final price point, which is going to be approximately $14.50 or so between now and DevCon. So if you do want to get started with Betterforms, now is the best time to do that because you'll stay at that price and you'll stay at this tier in terms of things that you can build. The only caveat, you're pretty much unlimited to everything. The only caveat is if it is a vertical market that's monetized, then it's a single application for that or a single license for that application. But otherwise, if you're a dev house and you're doing a bunch of little consulting and things like that, right now the current licensing offering is super, super generous. Right, and I think that's all for everybody today. Once again, thank you everybody for coming out. And if you want to kick around, we can and talk about other things. If not, you have to go. That's fine too. But once again, thank you. Angel just had a comment there. It says it's great to see the potential that FileMaker or FM Betterforms actually allows us as developers. You should see some of the things that people are building. It's so neat. Like when I see apps like what Jesse made or what Andrew made or what RecPro hosting one of our organizations have built, it's like I almost get teary-eyed. Like it's pretty cool seeing stuff. It sounds goofy, but it's true. Like it's like holy cow, So.